In May, CCTV was granted a rare interview with President Dilma Rousseff. It took place at the Palacio da Alvorada, the presidential residence in the capital, Brasilia. While Rousseff has lost her presidential office until the close of her impeachment trial, she's allowed to remain in the presidential palace and keep her employees. CCTV Correspondent Paulo Cabral conducted the interview with the suspended Brazilian president. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
Agora, eu estou na fase em que eu tenho de lutar. E acredito que será uma luta que contribuirá para o meu país. Por isso, eu tenho certeza que eu tenho de lutar, não apenas pelo meu mandato, sem dúvida também pelo meu mandato, mas sobretudo porque está em questão no Brasil não só a democracia, mas todas as conquistas que nós tivemos nos últimos anos, em todas as esferas. Tanto no que se refere à evolução e à melhoria da vida do povo brasileiro. Tiramos mais de 40 milhões de pessoas da pobreza. Mas também em relação a tudo que conquistamos internacionalmente. A própria política externa brasileira, que fez com que nós dessemos extrema importância para a própria América Latina, para a África e também para os países BRICS. Isso sem dizer que damos importância também aos Estados Unidos e à União Europeia. Mas antes não havia essa importância da América Latina, da África e dos países BRICS. Era como se a gente tivesse voltado as costas para a nossa própria região e para as outras regiões, e só víssemos os países envolvidos. Então, essa luta que eu estou travando é uma luta para assegurar e para garantir que o que conquistamos nos últimos 13 anos, 14 anos, seja de fato uma conquista sólida, firme e que não haja retrocesso.
Joining me now in the studio to give us some reaction to President Rousseff's interview is Professor Erick Langer. He is the former director of the Center for Latin American Studies at Georgetown University here in Washington, D.C. Professor, welcome to the show. President Rousseff says that she wants to fight. Does she have a fight? She's talking about all the good things that she's done for Brazil. Can she do it?
Well, I think she's going to try, but it seems that politically things are against her. Now, if I remember correctly, the Senate voted 56 against her, and it needed to be at least 55 votes. So in fact, I think what she's doing right now is trying to launch a campaign so that the Senate votes later when, after the process goes with the Supreme Court, then that she doesn't lose the presidency. But that's really an uphill battle right now because, as you probably know, Brazilian politics are so messy right now with all the corruption charges and things like that. And so everybody in one way or another is affected. And in fact, what appears to be the case is that at least as some ministers who've now had to resign have suggested, this is a way of getting them out of some of the corruption charges that actually the vast majority of Congress, unfortunately, is under right now.
And she is trying to make her case outside of Brazil. She mentioned some of the countries, some of the regions that Brazil has had successful dealings with. Let's take a listen to something else she had to say about that.
Aceito nesses termos seria golpe de Estado. E o golpe de Estado é por isso que a gente diferencia um do outro. E há literatura a respeito. O impeachment sem base, o impeachment porque o artigo 85 da Constituição exige que tenha crime de responsabilidade. Só diz o seguinte, não está previsto na Constituição. Agora, é absoluta ingenuidade dizer que está previsto na Constituição e não completar. Está previsto em que condições? Porque senão você está falando uma meia-verdade. E o resto da verdade, qual é? É o crime de responsabilidade. E eles não conseguem dizer que é crime de responsabilidade 6 decretos e um plano safra. O plano safra do qual sequer eu tive um ato participando. E eles não conseguem dizer qual é o crime. Então, é um processo que leva a uma imensa dificuldade. Por isso que eles queriam sistematicamente que eu renunciasse. Por quê? Se eu renunciasse, eu facilitaria o processo. Eles não teriam de enfrentar o problema do motivo pelo qual eu estou sendo afastada. Eu estou sendo afastada por um motivo sem fundamento. Daí é que eu digo que eu estou sendo injustiçada. E é isso que caracteriza o lado golpista. O que é um golpe? O golpe é um expediente que estão usando para tirar uma pessoa que não tem base legal para tirar. É isso que é o golpe.
President Rousseff telling the world that she is the victim of a coup d'etat. Is she a victim?
Well, first of all, many people on the left in various organizations, which I get lots of emails from, are asserting that. But I don't think it's really the case. Certainly, there's a power struggle. But for me, coup d'etat is where the military steps in and takes over. And what's actually quite interesting here is that despite the fact that President Rousseff sees herself as profoundly wronged, that there's no mention whatsoever of the military or of anything like that. This is really, more than anything else, something where you have the legislature becoming much stronger than has been anticipated. And in that case, they are taking over, and because Rousseff's popularity is so low, it's in the 20s or something like that, that she really doesn't have the popular support either. And of course, she won the last election just by very few votes. And actually, what's interesting is the first time in Brazilian history that northern Brazil actually elected the president. Always it was southern Brazil that, since the founding of the republic, and that always won. But this time, Rousseff won by depending on the north. And so as a result, she really is looking at things very differently and wants to get back the presidential system that had been in place, but because of the real unpopularity that she has right now, that's not the case.
Obviously, she was popular at one point to be elected. She is the first female president of Brazil. So what happened there? If she was unpopular, was that really her main downfall, or was she just an easy target?
Well, I think it's, as always, it's a little bit of both. I think she's an easy target right now, and so people are taking aim at her, particularly Michel Temer, who is now the interim president, who is her declared enemy at this point. Of course, he wasn't when they were reelected.
She says she was betrayed by him.
Exactly, and I think that's probably true. That's a good way to put it, but that's the way it is, and that's what happens in politics. But I think the other thing is this kind of a perfect storm, because in addition to the fact that the Brazilian middle classes actually were protesting against the lack of infrastructure spending, the inefficiency of the government, and of course, in this vast corruption scandal with Petrobras that exploded on the scene. And so as a result, that was one problem. But the other thing is, of course, that suddenly the commodities boom is over. And if you will, Brazil really tied its economic fortune to the commodities express. And of course, that has stopped, mainly because China simply isn't growing as quickly, and so commodities prices, as a result, tanked. And so suddenly, she doesn't have any money anymore. She's highly unpopular. You have the issues with the Zika virus. You have all kinds of things like that going on. And the president, who is really responsible because this is presidential system, suddenly finds that she has no resources to do anything because she doesn't have the money anymore. And so suddenly her popularity really tanked as well.
Let's talk about Petrobras. Could she have known? Let's listen to what she has to say about that.
É um golpe congressual. Nós vivemos aqui no Brasil num regime presidencialista. Nesse regime presidencialista, a Constituição estabelece que o presidente só pode ser afastado quando comete crime. Ora, eu não cometi nenhum crime. Não tenho contas na Suíça, não tenho acusação de corrupção. Do que me acusam? Me acusam de ter operado o orçamento de forma incorreta e que, ao invés de cortar gastos, eu teria deixado os gastos ocorrer. Pois bem, primeiro, isso não é verdade. Nós cortamos, talvez fizemos um grande ajuste fiscal no Brasil. Mas por que eles me acusam? Me acusam porque não tenho outro motivo para me acusar. Então, este motivo é bastante frágil. Por quê? Porque todos os presidentes que me antecederam cometeram, tiveram a mesma prática em relação ao orçamento. Igual. Não só fizeram créditos suplementares, que é disso que se trata, mas fizeram em número muito maior do que eu. E não era crime na época deles e não é crime hoje. É simplesmente uma prática no exercício da atividade governamental. Além disso, é sabido que o presidente da Câmara recebeu este processo e o recebeu por quê? Queria se vingar do governo que não aceitou a chantagem dele. Então, é um processo que tem esse pecado original. Ele é fruto de um desvio de poder. Um desvio de poder porque, no exercício da sua atividade, ele usou uma aceitação de um processo para se vingar. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, ele tem uma concepção completamente diferente do meu governo. Ele propõe e defende ajustes bastante neoliberais no Brasil.
So do you think President Dilma Rousseff committed any kind of crime, or do you think she's being penalized for a technicality?
Well, I think it's a technicality that can be defined as a misuse of power. So whether that's a crime or not is something, I'm not a lawyer and I can't tell you, certainly much less a lawyer of Brazilian law. But quite clearly what she did was not correct. And as a result, I think you can be impeached for that because she was trying to manipulate the budget so that she would be reelected. It
Something
worked.
that several of her predecessors have done in the past.
Exactly. And of course, at that point, Congress didn't impeach those presidents, but that's not up to the president to decide. That's up to Congress to decide whether they're going to do that. And what I find so interesting is that we're actually, when she talks about coup, we're still working within a democratic system. You have three powers, which are, if you will, fighting amongst each other. And if you talk about the Petrobras scandal, in fact, a number of analysts have said this is really, if you will, the judicial branch muscling in and showing much more power than ever has been the case in Brazil. But quite clearly, the Constitution permits that. And the Constitution also permits the Congress to impeach the president. And so we will just have to see what happens. But what's interesting is we're talking about presidents, we're talking about Congress, we're talking about judicial system, we're not talking about the military, we're not talking about public pressure demonstrations, the palace being raided, or anything like that. So in that sense, I think it's quite different. And if you will, within the range of democratic possibilities, with a system such as that Brazil has with its constitution.
With everyone around her mired in this Petrobras scandal, could she have known?
Well, that's the really big question, isn't it? My sense is after seeing how large it was, how could she not have known? And if she didn't know, which is a possibility, I have no idea, is why didn't she know? And I think that's the other question. In other words, one of the main reasons why she was elected initially was because everybody said, she's a great manager. she knows how to manage something, and she managed Petrobras, which is one of the largest petroleum oil companies in the world, one of the largest companies in the world. But quite clearly, she didn't manage it very well. So in fact, rather than that being in her favor, is really now against her as well, because even if she didn't know, that's almost as bad as if she did know.
Interesting. We have one more clip. President Dilma Rousseff again making her case for why she should remain president.
O candidato adversário teve 51 milhões de votos. E desde o primeiro dia, logo após a minha posse, o que aconteceu? Primeiro pediram recontagem dos votos e se verificou que não tinha nenhum problema. Depois pediram a reavaliação das urnas. Depois tentaram impedir que eu tomasse posse. E depois passaram sistematicamente a impedir o meu governo pelo controle que tinham da Câmara de Deputados. Então, no Brasil, não foi só uma crise econômica que eu enfrentei. Eu enfrentei uma crise econômica sobreposta a uma crise política. Uma crise política que a oposição forçava a deterioração do ambiente para criar as condições para ocorrer esse impeachment fraudulento ou golpe de Estado.
What does the future hold for President Dilma Rousseff? How do you see the impeachment trial playing out?
Well, as I told you, I'm a historian. I prefer to look backwards than forward. But it seems quite obvious to me that she will probably not get back into power. Of course, who knows? My sense is also that it's highly likely that the interim government will not last that long, and that the Brazilian government will have to call for new elections. And of course, then all bets are off, because so many people are implicated with so many things, and the country really is doing very poorly. I think it last year lost 4% of its GDP. It's predicted that this year it will as well. So it's economically a mess, and of course there is this political storm brewing, just like President Rousseff talked about, in which people are really at each other's throats. It sounds a little bit like the United States, in fact, in many ways in politics, but here it might be even more severe.
Will we see a complete turnaround of leadership if it comes to new elections? What will it take to turn the country around?
Well, this is the real problem, is that people have said if President Rousseff is impeached for something like this, you can do that practically with every governor of each state, which is, of course, the next generation, if you will, and certainly Congress being very much implicated in the Petrobras scandal as well. Plus, of course, so many people of the business class also being in jail right now because of that as well. And so the real problem is who can that new renovating force be? And that's not clear at all, because so many people are implicated in it, and basically from every single party except for the most marginal ones, that's the case. So it's really impossible to see right now, because it seems like the whole political class, if you will, is implicated. Of course, that might set up for a new populism, as is occurring in many other countries, but we really don't know. Brazil is Brazil, and Brazil is a huge country and has its unique history and also its unique political climate, and that's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen in the future.
Professor Erick Langer from Georgetown University, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Now.
Thank you very much for having me.
America's Now